All right, let's jump right in, folks. We're taking a deep dive into one of the most talked about stories in the news these days, North Korean troops in Russia.
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Yeah, it definitely has that kind of like Cold War thriller vibe to it, doesn't it? But this is actually happening.
Right, like this is November 2024. This is
the world we live in right now.
Exactly. And we've got a whole bunch of reports, international news reports spanning a few weeks that we're going to be looking at just to sort of unpack this whole thing and try to figure out, like, okay, what's happening here? And what does it mean for, for everyone?
Right. And it's really remarkable how quickly this has all unfolded. It really kind of makes you step back and rethink the dynamics of this whole conflict in Ukraine and, maybe even broader global implications. Who knows?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So it all started with these reports coming out of South Korean intelligence back on October 22nd, and they were claiming that North Korean troops were actually training in Russia, which, already kind of raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, for sure. But
then just a day later, a North Korean representative at the UN flat out denied any involvement, calling the reports groundless rumors, and even went so far as to say they were aimed at harming relations.
Oh, wow. That's pretty bold.
Right. And the crazy thing is that this is all happening while their foreign minister is meeting with Russian officials, like, at the same time. We're talking, this was reported in the South China Morning Post on October 22nd, so it's like, what's going on here?
It really makes you wonder about what their strategy is, publicly denying any involvement, but at the same time engaging in these high-level talks. It almost feels like some kind of calculated move to just muddy the waters and maintain that kind of plausible deniability.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions for sure, but things took a pretty sharp turn on October 23rd, because that's when the U.S. actually confirmed that North Korean troops had landed in Russia. And this was, a big deal because up until then, it was all these denials and speculations. But this official confirmation from the Pentagon really lent a lot of weight to those initial reports and kind of shifted the narrative completely.
Yeah, I think that U.S. confirmation was a major turning point because it really brought this issue into sharp focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just like a small contingent either. Initially, the Pentagon estimated about 3,000 troops, which is already a lot. But then by October 28th, ABC News was reporting that number had jumped to 10,000. And they were saying that these troops were likely to see combat within weeks.
And that's where things get really interesting from a sort of geopolitical perspective, because this is the first instance of a third country actually putting boots on the ground in this Ukraine conflict, which, as CBN pointed out on October 24th, has the potential to completely change the whole dynamic of the war.
So now we got to ask the question, why?
Yeah.
Why is North Korea getting involved in all of this? I mean, this is a country that's struggling economically. They're isolated internationally. What is Kim Jong-un's angle here?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, there are a few potential benefits that they might be looking at. One of them, obviously, is economic incentives.
Makes sense, right?
Right. So North Korea's economy has been struggling for years. I mean, it's no secret. And they could be seeking financial aid from Russia in exchange for providing troops. And Vernos reported on this possibility on October 25th.
Right. So Russia might be under all these sanctions, but they still have resources that North Korea desperately needs.
Exactly. And another possibility is military technology. So Russia could be offering North Korea, advanced weaponry, or maybe even just technical expertise as a form of payment. And this was something that Axios actually reported on back in June, suggesting that this had been kind of on the table for a while.
Wow, so they get paid and they potentially boost their military capabilities. It's quite a deal.
Yeah, it's a pretty tempting offer, but you're right to kind of question whether it's really that simple.
Yeah.
Because there are also some really important strategic implications here. North Korea might be looking to solidify its alliance with Russia against shared adversaries like the U.S. and South Korea.
Right.
So this idea of aligning with Russia against the West, it's kind of a recurring theme. We saw it in an NPR report on October 24th.
So, okay, let's recap this. North Korea potentially gets financial aid, military upgrades, A&D. They get to strengthen their strategic alliances. This is starting to look like a pretty good deal for Kim Jong-un. It goes way beyond just, basic survival.
Right.
He's leveraging this global crisis to really advance his agenda on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
You kind of have to admire the audacity of it all, even if you obviously condemn the actions themselves, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty audacious move for sure.
But let's flip the script for a second. Why would Putin turn to North Korea for help? I mean, isn't this kind of a sign of weakness?
Yeah, some people might interpret it that way, and it's important to remember that Russia has suffered some really heavy losses in Ukraine.
Right.
And the New York Times highlighted this in their reporting on October 23rd. So these North Korean troops could be seen as a way to get some much-needed reinforcements.
So, okay, he's desperate for more boots on the ground.
Well, it might be more than just that. Bringing in foreign troops could also be a way for Putin to project strength and defiance, like a way to say, hey, we're not alone in this. And The Guardian kind of suggested this in their analysis on October 24th. It sends a message, that they're willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goals in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a bold move, for sure. But has it really backfired in terms of the international response? Because it seems like there's been a lot of condemnation.
Absolutely. The international community has reacted very swiftly and strongly to this.
Yeah.
South Korea, for instance, is incredibly alarmed by all of this. And they're even considering sending weapons to Ukraine in response. This was something that NPR reported on actually on October 24th.
Whoa, hold on. Sending weapons to Ukraine? That would be a huge shift for South Korea. It seems like North Korea's involvement in all of this could completely change the entire landscape of the conflict.
Yeah, it really could. And it's not just South Korea that's concerned. President Zelensky of Ukraine has also denounced this troop deployment, and he's called for a strong international response. That was reported by Fox News on October 29th.
Right.
And on October 28th, ABC News reported that even NATO officials are raising concerns about the potential for escalation and even a wider conflict.
Okay, so things are tense, to say the least.
Yes.
But what about China? Where do they stand in all of this? I mean, they have ties to both Russia and North Korea. What's their role?
China's position is, how should I put this, ambiguous.
Yeah.
They're in a tricky spot.
Yeah.
On one hand, they're calling for de-escalation, and this was reported by Formisha on October 24th. But on the other hand, they're continuing to support Russia in various ways.
Oh, they're trying to play both sides.
It seems that way. They're trying to walk a very fine line here, maintaining their relationship with Russia without completely alienating the West. It's a very difficult balancing act.
Yeah, high-stakes diplomacy for sure. But let's get back to the current situation. As of today, November 2nd, where do things stand?
Well, just yesterday, the Daily Mail reported that North Korea's foreign minister, Cho Son-hu, was in Moscow, and she vowed to stand with Russia until Victory Day.
Wow.
Which is a pretty strong statement.
Yeah.
And there are even reports, from Ed Kronos on October 29th suggesting that Kim Jong-un himself might visit Russia soon to really solidify this alliance.
Okay, a Kim Jong-un visit to Russia. That would be historic. What kind of message would that send to the world? What are the implications of this increasingly tight relationship between these two countries?
Yeah, the implications are pretty significant. For one, it really solidifies a strong, I would even say destabilizing alliance between two heavily sanctioned nations.
Right.
And it raises a lot of questions about what kind of concessions North Korea might be getting in return for all of this.
Right.
Al Jazeera actually pointed this out on October 30th.
Yeah, so this is a lot more than just troop deployments, right?
Right.
We're talking about the potential for a new power dynamic on the world stage. And that has a lot of people concerned.
Absolutely. The situation is evolving really rapidly, and we're still seeing the implications unfold. This is something that we need to keep a very close eye on, that's for sure.
It really makes you wonder about the ripple effects. What happens if these North Korean troops actually engage in combat in Ukraine? Does this embolden Kim Jong-un's regime? Could it lead to more aggressive actions, maybe even on the Korean Peninsula? I mean, it's a chilling thought.
It's a valid concern, and I think it's something that policymakers around the world are really grappling with right now. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high,
Yeah.
and the potential for things to go wrong is enormous.
We've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah.
but I want to leave you with this thought. Imagine a scenario where North Korean artillery, maybe even upgraded with Russian technology, is used against South Korean forces.
Oh, wow.
That's
Just a scary thought.
That could escalate into a full-blown conflict drawing in the U.S., potentially even China. What seemed like a distant war suddenly ignites a regional powder keg, and we're right in the middle of it.
That's a really sobering thought and a very real possibility. I mean, this situation really has the potential to reshape the entire global landscape in ways that we can't even fully comprehend right now.
We need to stay informed. We need to stay engaged.
Absolutely.
Because what happens over there really does matter over here.
Couldn't agree more.
And now let's dive into the international reactions to this new alliance, especially from key players like the U.S., China, and the European Union.
Okay, sounds good. What's interesting is how the U.S. response to all this has sort of shifted over time.
Oh, what do you mean? Like, what kind of shift are we talking about? Did something specific happen?
Well, at first, they were kind of hesitant to even acknowledge the deployment of North Korean troops, like they were downplaying it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were downplaying the potential impact on the war in Ukraine. But as more evidence came out and it became clearer, how many troops we were talking about, their tone definitely got more serious.
Okay, so they're taking it more seriously now. Like, what's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he came out and called the situation very serious, even warned that North Korean forces would be considered co-belligerents if they actually engaged in combat.
Whoa, co-belligerence. What does that even mean in this context?
So it's a term with kind of deep legal and historical roots, but essentially it means that even though North Korea hasn't formally declared war on Ukraine, their actions, like sending troops to fight alongside Russia, put them in a kind of legal gray area
Oh, I see.
where they can be treated as if they are actually participating in the war, which obviously has huge implications for how the conflict might escalate.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal. It sounds like the U.S. is drawing a pretty clear line in the sand here.
Yeah, they are. And I think it reflects a growing concern within the U.S. government about what this alliance could mean, not just for the war in Ukraine, but for global security in general.
So this is about more than just Ukraine now. It's about the possibility of this destabilizing other regions, maybe escalating tensions between some of these major world powers.
Exactly. And it's not just the U.S. Even NATO officials have expressed serious concerns, urging North Korea to pull back its troops from Russia.
But are these strongly worded statements really going to be enough? Is anyone actually trying to, you know, stop this from happening?
Well, that's the challenge. Direct intervention is a risky proposition because of, the possibility of escalation.
Right.
Nobody wants to accidentally trigger a wider war, especially one that could potentially involve nuclear weapons.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Uh.
Um, so are we basically stuck just watching from the sidelines as this plays out?
Well, not necessarily. There are still some diplomatic and economic tools that can be used. For example, the U.S. and its allies could impose even tougher sanctions on both Russia and North Korea, make it harder for them to cooperate.
But wouldn't that just further isolate North Korea and push them even closer to Russia?
That's a valid point. It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
But sanctions are really about trying to change behavior, not just punish. The message needs to be clear that supporting Russia's aggression has consequences.
Okay, so what about China? They have close ties to both Russia and North Korea. What's their take on all this? What are they doing?
China. Their role is absolutely crucial, but also incredibly complicated.
Yeah, seems like they're always walking this tightrope.
They are trying to maintain these relationships with both Russia and North Korea without, pushing the West too far.
Right.
It's like trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Right, but are they really neutral?
Well, their actions suggest otherwise. Publicly, they call for dialogue, de-escalation. But behind the scenes, they're providing economic and diplomatic support to Russia, and they've been very hesitant to actually criticize North Korea's involvement.
So yeah, playing both sides.
In a way, yeah. They're definitely playing a very careful game, trying to avoid any direct confrontation.
It's a high-stakes game.
Yeah.
And it seems like China's really good at it.
Yeah, they're masters of realpolitik, that's for sure. They're not going to make any rash moves that could put their position at risk.
So what's the end game for China? What are they hoping to achieve in all of this?
Ultimately, I think they want to maintain stability in the region and advance their own economic and geopolitical interests.
Makes sense.
They see the U.S. as their main rival, and they're not going to do anything that strengthens America's position.
So they're willing to tolerate basically Russia's aggression and North Korea's provocations as long as it serves their own purposes.
It's a cynical calculation, but it's one that makes sense from their point of view.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that international relations are often driven by pragmatism rather than, principle.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we need to be realistic about the motivations of these key players.
For sure. Speaking of motivations, there's another layer to all of this that we haven't really talked about. The potential for North Korea to use this alliance to advance their nuclear program.
Right.
It's kind of like the elephant in the room.
It's a major concern. North
Yeah.
Korea is under heavy sanctions for a reason. And it's not just their rhetoric. They've been actively developing their nuclear capabilities for years. And there's a real fear that Russia might be willing to help them, in exchange for their support in Ukraine.
That is a terrifying thought.
Yeah.
A nuclear-armed North Korea with closer ties to Russia What a nightmare scenario.
It's definitely cause for concern, and it's something that a lot of experts and analysts have raised. Russia has advanced technology expertise that North Korea desperately wants.
So essentially, Kim Jong-un could be using this conflict as leverage to further his own nuclear ambitions.
It's plausible. There's no such thing as a free lunch in geopolitics.
Right.
If North Korea is sending troops to fight and die for Russia, they're going to want something substantial in return.
It's a high-risk gamble, for sure, one that could have some devastating consequences.
Yeah.
But is there any actual proof that North Korean troops are fighting on the front lines in Ukraine? Or is this all just speculation and intelligence reports?
That's the million-dollar question. We haven't seen any definitive confirmation of them actually engaging in combat, but there are a lot of signs pointing in that direction.
So what kind of evidence are we talking about here? What have we seen?
Well, there have been reports from Ukrainian intelligence claiming that North Korean troops have been spotted in Russian-occupied territories, specifically the Kursk region.
Okay, why is Kursk significant?
Remember that Ukrainian counteroffensive back in August?
Oh, right.
That was in Kursk. It's an area where Russia has been really struggling.
That's
So sending North Korean troops there would be a pretty strategic move to bolster their defenses.
right. It suggests that these troops aren't just there for, training or show. They're actually being deployed to active combat zones.
Exactly. And it's not just reports. There was even a video circulating online earlier this month that allegedly showed North Korean soldiers in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Now, it's hard to verify the authenticity of stuff like that, but it definitely adds fuel to the fire.
Oh, yeah. It adds to the sense of urgency, for sure.
For sure. And it's not just Ukraine that's raising the alarm. U.S. officials have stated that, they haven't actually seen North Korean troops in combat yet, but they're saying it could happen in the coming days. That was according to a report in the Daily Mail on November 1st.
So we're potentially on the brink of a major escalation here.
It seems that way. And it's not just about the number of troops involved.
Right.
It's about the precedent this sets. If North Korea can actively participate in this conflict without serious consequences, it could really embolden other nations to get involved, potentially dragging this out even further.
It's a dangerous game they're playing, with some potentially catastrophic outcomes.
Yeah, it's like a high-stakes game of brinkmanship.
Exactly. And it's happening on a global stage with implications far beyond the borders of Ukraine.
You're right. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. It's a flashpoint for all these global tensions with the potential to escalate into something much, much bigger.
I agree. While we kind of wait and see what happens, it seems important to try and understand the bigger picture here. To understand what motivates these key players and what the potential consequences of their actions might be. Like, for example, how is all of this playing out domestically in North Korea? Kim Jong-un runs a pretty secretive and repressive regime, right?
That's a really good point. We rarely get any insight into what's happening inside North Korea.
Yeah.
But some reports suggest that the families of these soldiers being sent to Russia are actually being kept under pretty close watch.
Really?
Yeah, potentially to prevent any dissent or unrest.
So trying to silence any opposition to their involvement in the war?
It's a classic tactic of authoritarian regimes. Control the narrative, control the people.
Right, right. But isn't it risky for Kim Jong-un to be sending troops to fight in a foreign war? Especially one that's so far away and, seemingly unrelated to their own national interests.
It is a gamble, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's one that he might be willing to take if he thinks the potential payoff is worth it.
Okay, so what's the payoff? Besides the nuclear technology and conventional weapons we've already talked about, what else is he hoping to gain?
Well, there's the economic aspect, of course. North Korea's economy is, as we've said, in really bad shape, and they're desperate for resources, for hard currency. Russia, even under sanctions, still has a lot to offer.
Right, so it's like a trade. Soldiers for survival.
In a way, yeah. It's a pretty cynical transaction, but one that might make sense for Kim Jong-un. I mean, at the end of the day, he's mostly concerned with staying in power and ensuring the survival of his regime.
It's a bleak outlook, but it's important to be realistic about what's motivating these players. It's not about ideology or morality. It's about power and self-interest.
A harsh truth, but one that applies not just to North Korea, but to a lot of nations and leaders throughout history.
Very well said. It's definitely something to keep in mind as we try to navigate this complex and, frankly, pretty uncertain world. Now, let's examine how the international community is reacting to this new alliance.
Yeah, it does feel like we're at this kind of crossroads, doesn't it? On one side, you have the established global order led by the U.S. and its allies. And then on the other side, you have these emerging alliances, like the one we're talking about between Russia and North Korea. And they're kind of challenging that status quo and pushing for this more multipolar world.
It's that classic power struggle playing out on a global scale. And, at the end of the day, these things are always about influence and resources and control.
So where does this new alliance between Russia and North Korea fit into all of that? Like, what are they actually trying to achieve?
Well, both sides are looking to advance their own interests. Russia, I think, really wants to reassert itself as a major player on the world stage. They want to break free from the constraints of that U.S.-led order and kind of reclaim their old sphere of influence.
And they see this alliance with North Korea as a way to do that. Exactly, yeah. North Korea, on the other hand, they're seeking security and recognition.
Mhm.
They want to be seen as a legitimate nuclear power, and they want to make sure the regime survives. It's about survival for them.
So they see Russia as a good partner to help them achieve those goals.
Yeah, Russia provides them with military support, economic aid, diplomatic cover, and in return, North Korea gives Russia troops, resources, and this strategic foothold in East Asia.
So it's a win-win situation, right?
Yeah.
At least, on the surface. But it seems like there are costs as well. For Russia, there's this further alienation from the West, tougher sanctions, potential diplomatic blowback. And for North Korea, it means even more isolation, dependence on a partner that's not exactly known for stability, and the risk of getting pulled into conflicts that are, far from home.
Exactly. You're right. There are definitely risks and challenges for both sides, but it seems like, at least for now, they're willing to gamble.
Yep.
They're both willing to take those risks because they think it will help them achieve their bigger goals.
So all this is happening, on the other side of the world, but why should the average person care? How does any of this affect us?
Well, it has the potential to affect all of us because this alliance could lead to greater instability worldwide. It could really heighten tensions between some of these major powers, and that could even increase the risk of a larger conflict.
So this isn't just a faraway problem. It's something that could actually have real consequences for our lives.
Right. It could affect a lot of things. The prices we pay for stuff, even our personal safety and security.
That's a pretty sobering thought. So what can we do about it? How do we even begin to understand what's going on and deal with the challenges that are coming our way?
I think the first step is to stay informed. We have to understand the motivations of these different players, what could happen as a result of their actions, and consider all the different perspectives on this whole issue.
So it's not about just picking a side and sticking to it. It's about trying to understand this situation from all angles.
Yeah, exactly. It's about getting the full picture, and then we need to think critically.
Right.
We can't just accept things at face value. We have to question assumptions, challenge the narratives we hear, and consider different viewpoints.
In other words, we have to be active participants in this whole thing, not just passive observers.
Right, exactly. And that means engaging in constructive dialogue, promoting understanding, and working together to find solutions. It's not easy, but it's necessary.
Very well said. This deep dive into the whole situation surrounding North Korean troops in Russia, it's been eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah, it really has.
It's a complex and evolving story with big implications for the world.
Absolutely. And the story's not over yet, so we need to stay vigilant, stay informed, stay engaged, because the choices we make today, they really do impact the world of tomorrow.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope this has provided you with some valuable insights and maybe some things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as always, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning. The world is full of complexities, and it's up to all of us to make sense of it.